Good afternoon, and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland and this week's Full Scottish. My name is Nadia Chand. On the program this week, we are delighted to be joined by Marion Fellows. Good afternoon, Marion, and welcome to the program.
Nadia.
And we are also delighted to welcome William Duguid. Good afternoon, William.
Good afternoon. I'll try and get in the middle of the picture here. Oh, that's better. Nice to see you.
Thank you, William. To start with, we will start with the Ukraine update. On Saturday, Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky said he had spoken to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman about the situation in Iran and the Middle East and restated Kiev's offer to help deal with the Iranian drones. Ukrainian manufacturers of cheap interceptor drones designed to knock out enemy unmanned aerial vehicles say they have the capacity to export in large volumes amid inquiries from the US and Middle East prompted by the Iran war. Hundreds of drones based on Iran's Shahed model and now made in Russia fill Ukraine's skies during frequent attacks, and many are downed by air defenses, including Western missiles, fighter jets, truck-mounted guns, and interceptor drones. Deaths and casualties from a Russian missile strike on a 5-story residential building, Ukraine's second-largest city of Kharkiv, have risen to at least 10 people dead, including 2 children and 16 others wounded, officials said. President Zelensky condemned Saturday's attack and called for an international response. He said Russia struck Ukraine overnight with 29 missiles and 480 drones targeting energy facilities in Kiev and the other central regions, with damage reported in at least 7 other locations. Police in Sweden have seized a false flag cargo ship off its southeast coast believed to belong to Russia's shadow fleet and suspected of transporting stolen Ukrainian grain, authorities said Saturday. The 96-meter Kaffa left Casablanca in Morocco on 24th February, headed for St. Petersburg, when armed Swedish police boarded it on Friday off the southern town of Trelleborg. American weapons stockpiles have grown as the U.S. campaign against Iran escalates, with many Democratic lawmakers arguing that Trump is waging a war of choice. Missile defense systems are under the most strain. According to experts with Patriot and Terminal High Altitude Area Defense or THAAD interceptors in high demand in Ukraine and Israel respectively. I'm not particularly worried about us actually running out during this conflict, said Ryan Brobst, a scholar focused on the U.S. defense strategy at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. It's about deterring China and Russia the day after this conflict is over. Shall I come to you, Mary?
Yes, thanks, Nadia. I mean, what's happening in the Middle East is worrying all of us and should be worrying all of us. I think the fact that Trump keeps changing his mind about why the war started, what he's actually doing, all of that is really unsettling. And also, innocent people being killed in any conflict, any war, is really unacceptable. And for Trump to expect the Iranian people to rise up against the incumbent government is a bit fanciful, because they've already seen what happens if they do rise up. And I don't think that many people in Iran at the moment feel that they're able to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, Iran's a very different country from what it's not. There are so many different peoples in Iran, and that makes it quite difficult to get.
We'll come to the Iran thing in the next one.
Absolutely. So I worry, and I think most people do, about the strategy, and if there is one from Trump, and also about the strategy if there is one from the UK government.
Yeah. Very true. William?
Talking specifically about Ukraine, I mean, Ukraine has very much become probably the forgotten war in the context of everything else that's going on.
Yeah.
But it is interesting that Zelensky has made the link with the Shahed missiles and the Ukrainian technology's capacity to ward them off as far as possible. Not totally, because of course of the 480 drone strikes yesterday, I'm sure some got through, and of course some missiles got through to that hotel in Kharkiv. So that really continues, that conflict, and it seems to me increasingly to look like a stalemate. And I'm not quite sure what the way out of it is. One can just see it going on at the current levels, maybe for 1 or 2 years more, without really Russia gaining significant ground, but also without Ukraine being able to ward them off in any major way, which is obviously a concern. But the thing that might change things, of course, is the rise in the price of oil as a result of the Middle East conflict, which would tend overall to favour Russia, even with sanctions in place. It might give Russia more staying power, because the one thing that might stop this is Russia finally exhausting its resources of money and men. But until that happens, I think we've got a stalemate going on ad infinitum in Ukraine.
Yeah, very true. I'll move on to the Middle East updates here.
While the world focuses on the US and Israel's attack on Iran, the death toll in Gaza continues to rise, with a total of 72,123 Palestinians killed and 171,805 injured since 7th of October 2023. Since the October 2025 ceasefire, 640 Palestinians have been killed and 1,707 have been injured. Was going to war against Iran necessary now, while talks were ongoing, or is Trump trying to show he can be a strong leader like his friend Putin, who he seems to admire? William.
Well, it's certainly something to go to war while talks are ongoing, and that point's been made on several occasions. In fact, it was made to Trump by a Fox News really, I say supporter of his. I mean, I'm just assuming Fox News is generally a supporter of Trump's, Peter Doocy, who mentioned, you were negotiating, what's going on? And of course, Trump dismissed it as the usual stupid question. But that's the problem. We're not dealing in a world where real substantive questions are treated as anything other than irrelevances. It seems increasingly clear, because the apparent rationale for going to war with Iran now, it keeps shifting. It's one thing, then it's another. Maybe it's regime change, maybe it's keeping their nuclear ambitions under control, which is something I thought the US managed to do a few months ago, so I don't know why that would be back on the agenda. It just doesn't seem to have any completeness about it or any coherence about it, and I think going into something like that without a plan is just walking into a quagmire, and it's very difficult to see how this ends, what Trump would recognise as a good end to it, and what the world would recognise as a satisfactory end to it. It just seems to be inviting chaos, and chaos is never something that works to people's advantage in the long term. Nobody can benefit from chaos. Even billionaires cannot benefit from chaos. There is all sorts of unforeseen consequences, and I suspect these will unfold both for the US and for the world in the next few weeks, and it's a matter of great concern.
Yeah, without an objective, Trump going into the war. What about UK's role, and how has Starmer performed? How has Starmer performed? UK's role is always, the role of the UK government is to protect UK citizens wherever they are. And how has Starmer performed? Well, it seems to be that he's looking at rules-based laws, international law. The rumours that, or the leaks that came about him changing his mind against David Miliband, not David, his brother, Ed Miliband, saying, no, we can't go and help the US because of what happened in the Iraq war. It just seems inconceivable that the UK Prime Minister can't take a stance and hold it. Now, whether that's the right stance and whether I agree with it, it's the fact that he seems to actually change his mind depending on the last person who spoke to him, and we don't need that kind of strategy or non-strategy in a really serious world event such as what Trump has done in Iran and what he's done with the help of Israel, and factually what he's done to help Israel, which is the bottom line. And Starmer seems to be caught in a bind. I mean, this wonderful personal relationship he has with Trump has simply been blown out of the water, and what's going to happen to the UK in world terms because of that, who knows? There'll be absolutely more expense and more cost to the UK because if Trump doesn't like us, tariffs will go up.
Yeah. William, how has Starmer performed in this?
Yeah, well, Keir Starmer's in a slightly tricky situation, as are all the Western leaders. I'm quite sceptical about the idea that the UK can assist purely with defensive stuff when Trump is waging an aggressive war. And I think there's going to be a degree of mission creep, as it's called, about it, where we actually do get drawn in, and there are consequences to that. Apart from anything else, I think people who know about international law would almost all conclude that this is an illegal war by any measure, and for us to be implicated in it is not sensible politics. But I do recognise the problem Starmer has got, because he's trying to balance several things at once, and there is still this vestigial idea that the US is an ideal partner for us if only they could be trusted. But increasingly the evidence is that they can't, and to be associated with them is trouble, and particularly to be associated with them in what's turning out, I think, even after a few days, to be an uncontrollable situation with unforeseeable consequences, and not just strategic consequences, not just in terms of peril, but in terms of the world economy, in terms of world coherence and stability. It's not a good look and not a great place to be. But I think Starmer has now made his bed, and he will have to lie in it.
Yes.
Yeah. What now for the international rules-based world order? And
what international rules-based world order would that be?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
I think it would have to be rebuilt.
And also, if we can discuss about using UK facilities for this so-called, you mentioned about the illegal war by Trump. What's your opinion on that?
I think it's highly risky. The sort of, apparently it's being decided on the basis of what is in the UK's interest, and I'm not convinced, despite what government ministers, including Yvette Cooper this morning on Laura Kuenssberg, are saying. I'm not convinced that allowing the Americans to use the bases and the facilities is actually in the UK's national interest, because right now the US is not a trustworthy partner, and it just invites being dragged into severe difficulty with international law, and severe difficulty in the long term with revenge terrorist attacks, apart from anything else. They don't just spring out of nowhere. They tend to come up as an indirect result of how we conduct ourselves in the world. And that just happens to be a fact. And it makes the world a more dangerous place for us and a more uncertain place for us. And so I don't really agree with it at all, although we're there now. So what happens next, we will just have to see.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's real difficulty is how the world reacts to what we do, what other partners we have in trading terms or any other terms, what the Commonwealth think, for example. It's really important that the UK keeps its very difficult position alive in these really hourly changing circumstances. The fact that comparisons have been made with the war on Iraq, but this is entirely different because we have a US president who changes his mind almost hour to hour. The fact that he started off the war because I think he thought, and various commentators have said he thought it would be like Venezuela and he could get regime change in Iran, and of course that's not going to happen as easily as it did in Venezuela. And actually the UK are bang in the middle of all this, and I suppose we also have to look at the economic side of this. What's happening with the supplies of oil and gas, what's happening to our Middle Eastern allies. It's really important that we kind of steer a steady, straight path and keep as many people on board and on side as we can. Whether that's going to happen when things are in such a flux at the moment, who knows? Because Starmer also changes his mind quite often. We've seen evidence of that right through his reign, if you like, as PM. And we really, really need someone who's got a steady hand on the tiller to take the UK through this with the least possible harm to both our citizens and to our economy.
William, would you like to add something to that?
I think Marion's pretty well summed it up. So I don't really have much more to say on that one, but I'll answer any other question you may have. Marion was,
comparing Iraq and Iran war, and one thing we haven't discussed about the civilians in all these places, how worried they are, and whether it's Iran or Israel or any of these countries, and there were children were killed, and Trump is saying that it's not American missile, and nobody wants to take the claim on that, and also. As you mentioned, Trump doesn't have his own mind. So, how does this end? Do you see there could be an end to this?
Well, I mean, these things sometimes end very quickly, but other times they drag on. I mean, the Iraq War dragged on for a very long time. The earlier Gulf War did not. Yes. But in both of the previous two cases, there was a specific goal, and indeed. In the initial Gulf War, once Kuwait was sorted out, the temptation to go into Iraq and get oneself bogged down was resisted by George H.W. Bush. His son wasn't quite so careful when it came to the Iraq War somewhat later. But this is a degree worse even than this. And yes, it visits terrible carnage on the population. And of course, when you consider that one of the declared reasons for this assault on Iran was regime change, taking out the top people so that people could rise up. The people are the ones suffering right now from it, and there is no mechanism by which they can rise up. They'll still be put down if they attempt it, and there's no indication that the Americans have the wherewithal or even the will to help them. So again, it's the little people that are in the middle of the big geopolitical games, and it's very difficult to see how this pans out. We look back at other things and see, well, there was a sort of end and things moved on, and it may not have been satisfactory, but it sort of was foreseeable at some point. There are all sorts of things about this one that look a wee bit different to me and make me a wee bit more worried about just where it might go. And part of that is the instability that Trump constantly is showing in his behavior now, and the fact that nothing within the American power structure, if you like, seems willing to restrain that. Yes, there's lots of opposition to it now amongst the people in America, but at the moment, what Trump says goes, and that is a very dangerous position to be in, I think.
And do you see a democratic government in Iran soon? Both of you. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. The answer to that is probably not. Because at the moment, the regime has still got a stranglehold on all the various populations in Iran. And as I said earlier, the people do not want to rise up against this at the moment because they're ducking, they're hiding from attack from America and Israel, and that's not going to help. And what worries me in the longer term is the displacements of people in the Middle East. And where are these people going to come? We already have evidence going back a number of years, people leaving because of the regimes because of attacks on the regimes. So this is not going to get any better. And as for the US, anyone in the US being able to stop Trump, that is very unlikely until the midterms in November, and that's a long, long way away, and a lot more damage could be done to the world in the meantime.
Yeah. William, I'll have 1 minute for you.
1 minute, okay. I think there's huge popular support, even now within Iran, for a more democratic, better way of doing things without all the repression and evil that's gone on, that's been inflicted on them. However, they have no way of bringing that about, and as Marion said, they're completely distracted and keeping their heads down right at the moment with all the aerial bombardment that's going on. So I don't see it right now, and I don't see the mechanism ever coming along in the near future that's going to bring it about. I'm very sorry to say, because the one thing I would agree with Trump on is that the Iran leadership was evil.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. In her spring statement this week, Chancellor Rachel Reeves told MPs that the OBR had cut the UK growth forecast. The UK plans to increase spending on defence, but is the commitment to renewing Trident nuclear missiles and submarines is at the expense of conventional weapons and personnel? William?
Trident. I don't like Trident, obviously, and I think Trident is probably outdated, and I would certainly favour not renewing it. I would favour the UK getting rid of nuclear weapons altogether, but I don't think that's going to happen. I do think that really any allocation in the public sphere should now be to general defence, and this again is looking at the world situation and the fact that all the European countries are going to have to step up to the mark and increase the defence spending. And I'm not convinced that nuclear weapons is the place to put it. So I think there needs to be a lot more of a radical approach than we've seen in the spring statement. And that's basically all I can say on it. Marion can take the rest.
Well, I would say, our spring statement was redundant the moment even she stood up in the House of Commons to give it, because things move so quickly in the Middle East. That's going to have a huge impact on, if the OBR has already said growth forecasts aren't going to be as good as the government had hoped, it's going to be even worse now. And spending money, and I totally agree, William, spending money on nuclear weapons at a time when they cost so much money, and that we are so reliant on the US, because we can't do if someone was crazy enough to push a button, we can't do that without the US helping us and agreeing, because it's their systems that we're using. So, as far as I'm concerned, nuclear weapons have always been a no-no. We do need to spend more on defence, but where is that money going to come from? And anything that the Chancellor said in her spring statement is, as I said, already redundant, and the whole government economy has to be looked at, whole UK economy has to be looked at again. I think there may have to be another statement, not waiting until the budget in October, November. That might be too long to see exactly where the country is going, because people are not happy with this government on the way that they've been dealing with issues in terms of tax rises and money in people's pockets. Inflation is bound to go up if the price of oil continues to rise the way it's done.
The Chancellor has been criticised for failing to support the UK economy despite her repeatedly talking about growth. She ignored calls to cut the energy profits levy, which critics says is leading to job losses in North Sea. Should the Chancellor be taking a leaf out of the Scottish Government's budget book? Marion.
Well, I mean, the Chancellor should be looking at balancing the budget. Now, one of the things she did say was that we're paying less now in loan repayments, and that's a good thing. But if we're going to have to really inflate and really build up our defences much more quickly. I think it's going to be about 3 or 4 years before we're actually going to increase defence spending. If we're going to have to change that again is just all bets are off as to where we are. We're almost, and I don't want to use the term a wartime economy, but we're really going to have to look very carefully at our defence budget, look at how we are going to manage our defences. And if we don't go nuclear, which I don't think we have the capacity to spend the money, because replacing the nuclear deterrent is going to cost far, far more than replacing or upgrading conventional weaponry. I mean, look what's happened. We're supposed to have sent up a ship over to the Middle East. It's not going till next week. We had nothing in place nearby the Middle East, and knowing that there was an upscale intention there. So we need to have enough capacity to increase, but none of this increase our defence spending. But how do we do that against the rising cost of borrowing to pay for the upgrade in defence spending? And it's going to hit hard on everyone right across the UK, because there's only one way really, as far as I can see, to square this circle, is more taxing.
Yeah. William?
Looking at the Spring Statement more generally, and the question of growth, I would actually disagree with Marion a wee bit in that, the Scottish Government absolutely has to balance its books, and the Scottish Spending Review in January was a pretty textbook example of a wee bit of elegance in doing that. I thought it was quite a commendable one by Shona Robinson, and it was keeping the priorities at the top and making savings where necessary, but still ploughing as much money as possible into where it was needed. The UK, it's different, of course, because the UK's got control over its own currency. And I think the time may have come for an actual boost to the UK economy to drive up public spending in the areas where it needs to be spent, because that's how you get out of getting on for a third world economy, as we seem to be. And I think really there's too many areas of the public sector within the UK that are suffering from lack of resources. And one area that's suffering from another thing, of course, is the energy sector, where I think the Energy Profits Levy, which was originally intended as a short-term measure, really needs now to be looked at. And the Scottish Government has been talking to Westminster about this for some time. John Swinney made 2 representations. Gillian Martin, the Climate Action and Energy Secretary, wrote her a letter, Rachel Reeves, in February. And there was another letter from Shona Robinson about the time of the Spring Statement saying, look, you really need to do something about this because it's holding back jobs and investment. It's accelerating the decline in North Sea oil and gas, which will happen not naturally over time and should happen, but nevertheless happen at a natural pace. But also it's holding back investment in renewables, which is the real thing we're going to need, particularly as the demands for energy grow. And it seemed to me that the Spring Statement in that regard was rearranging the deck chairs in the Titanic. And I think the economy needs more than that. I think it needs a boost.
Yeah, and also, Marion.
Well, I mean, I think anything that Rachel Reeves does that looks as though she's taking advice from the Scottish Government will not go down well in UK Labour circles, because of the Scottish election. All of this is all tied up with the Scottish election coming forward. And many times, and I hark back to my time at Westminster with my colleagues, where wherever there was a good idea from Scotland that emanated in Scotland, it was immediately turned down by the UK Tory government at that point, because it was Scottish, basically. And the same thing seems to be happening with this particular UK government. At the moment, we need growth in Scotland as well. And as as William has said, we need to look seriously at oil situation and the jobs situation in Scotland linked to oil, and to take away the levy so that the money can be spent on producing more jobs in Scotland and in growing our economy, which will also benefit the UK economy.
Yeah. While we are talking about the economy, if I may link and ask this question, our exports are going to be affected by this war, right? It could be. So that will have an effect on the economy as well, especially when it comes to the Scotland's perspective.
Yes, I mean that is. This is yet another example of the Scottish Government being constrained because they don't have control over the things that really matter and really will help Scotland's economy grow. I don't know what the answer is. Perhaps William's got a better idea on that than me. But we need to be working with the UK Government, and the UK Government actually needs to be listening to the Scottish Government in a way that this particular Labour Government has not been doing since 2024 July. You know, it's absolutely important in a time like this that we actually all work together.
Yeah. William?
I can't disagree with that. But the UK Government has never truly worked with the Scottish Government, and particularly since the SNP came to power, and that was seen as an existential threat, which maybe it is. But nevertheless, that's no reason for politicking to get in the way of doing things properly and working to everybody's benefit. Scotland has such strengths as an economy that the UK should be taking better advantage of it. We're not maybe exploited enough, good grief. I mean, I'd like control over it ourselves, but what's the point in constraining the good things? England's going to rely increasingly on Scotland for its energy and for so much else. Either as part of the UK or once we're independent, we'll charge them a good price for it. That's fine. But let's not be passing policies or failing to get rid of things that are getting in the way of that. And I totally agree with Marion on the thing she said at the start. This whole statement is effectively made redundant by what's going on in the world as well. So I don't expect it to hang around for very long. I think there's going to have to be an adjustment, something else that maybe just looks at the situation as it is, not at the situation as let's put down our enemies or our opponents, and actually does something that brings things a little bit more positive than they have been, and maybe we can start to motor as an economy again, because we haven't been for quite a number of years.
Thank you.
Yes.
A report this week showed that 65 people in Scotland had their criminal convictions arising out of Post Office Horizon scandal quashed. Has enough been done to provide redress to the victims of the Post Office Horizon scandal? And what about holding those responsible to account? Marion, I know this is your topic. And
yes, I wish it weren't, but I have spent a great deal of time and I'm still working on post office issues. The Scottish Government were forced by the UK Government at the time to produce their own bill. And the situation in Scotland for identifying those who had been wrongly convicted was different. Because there was no separate heading for Horizon convictions. So there was a great deal of work done by the Scottish Government. I want to thank many of the civil servants that I met who'd been working on that as well. So 65 people have had their convictions quashed, and that is a good thing. But it's still not doing anything, and the Scottish Government has no remit over what happens to those who were responsible for the Post Office Horizon scandal. And until Sir Win Williams actually produces his final report, which should be sometime this year, we won't know the scale of what has been actually discovered. I think we do know a lot about who's responsible, but I think the government is going to wait on Sir Win's report. And I think Sir Win will take his time to do it properly. I think he broke precedent in a way last July when he produced the human impact report and took that away. But the human impact has not gone away on postmasters and their families. We forget that many young people are still suffering the effects of what happened to their parents because of Horizon, and now of course the capture and all the other scandals that have been unearthed during the time of the inquiry. I think it's really important, and I believe that there is going to be an all-party parliamentary group set up this month in Parliament, that we keep pushing this matter, because those who are responsible are still getting away with what it is. I fell out with a leading expert, shall we say, on post office scandal, the Horizons scandal, because I said, oh, we have to make sure that those people who are supposed to, we think have been responsible for the scandal, we have to be sure that's right. I think we are sure now. People like Paula Venables had a huge impact, and going further back, lots of other post office officials. I think we need to get the Metropolitan Police moving faster on it. They have been investigating these incidences for years now, spending millions of pounds, and still post office people who were affected, or who affected the change, who led the prosecutions against innocent people, are still not paying the penalty, and that's not right.
Okay. William?
Wholeheartedly agree with Marion. It's one thing ultimately to get justice in the sense of perhaps your conviction has been quashed, and even to be in a process where you're going to get compensation for that. I don't think it's possible to get enough compensation really to offset what's been done to your life, and to your family, and to those perhaps who didn't make it through, who lost their lives as a result of the pressure placed on them unfairly. But that's only part of justice. The other part is that the people who are responsible for the issue need to be brought to justice. And justice grinds incredibly slowly in this country, but we hopefully we will get there this year when the report comes out, and then something will be done. And then it'll start to look as if maybe we've grappled with the whole of this problem as it needed to be grappled with. It's taken so long to bring it even to this point, and goodness me, it took a dramatisation on the TV, to my mind, in January 2024, even to get it moving as fast as it needed to go. But now we need to complete the job, and certainly justice needs to be in the round for all the people who suffered, to see the actual perpetrators brought to justice. And I very much hope that happens.
Nadia, could I add one thing? Fujitsu's role in all of this, and Lee Castleton, who is one of the postmasters who was affected, he's now gone to court to try to hold Fujitsu to account. Fujitsu's MD in UK said, oh, we have a moral obligation and we'll do all we can, and nothing has happened. And in the meantime, the UK government has still been giving out contracts to Fujitsu, and they need also to be called to account.
Thank you. It's such a sad issue. As Shabana Mahmood, sorry about that. As Shabana Mahmood announced for the restrictions of refugees and asylum seekers, is the UK in breach of its international obligations? Are we doing enough to counter far-right disinformation about immigration and asylum? Should the UK be creating more opportunities for migrant workers to come to the UK to work in areas affected by labour shortages such as the hospitality and care sectors? William, would you like to go first?
Yeah. Well, the first question in terms of international obligations, merely tightening the restrictions does not necessarily breach international obligations, but the international obligations are considerable. You need to be absolutely sure that you treat asylum claims respectfully and consistently, and that you don't in any way restrict people's ability to claim asylum. And if you decide that they don't get to stay, you don't get to put them back into danger. You don't put them back where they came from if they're genuinely in danger there, or you don't put them to third countries that you think are safe or you say are safe, but are not actually safe. And those are absolutely red lines. Now, there's no indication necessarily that what Shabana Mahmood is thinking in terms of is going to breach those, but it could, depending on the way it's interpreted and depending on the way it actually happens in practice. And particularly, there's a danger if you assess claims differently depending on how people got there, because that isn't on either. So I think that the UK has to tread carefully, I think. And I'm not entirely convinced that we've got a handle on the whole of it yet. In terms of what we need within the economy, we absolutely need, and Scotland definitely needs, to have people to enhance the workforce in certain areas, and indeed in all areas. And Scotland should have more immigration from all sources, not just by people seeking asylum, but just general immigration, just to keep things ticking over as things stand. And nothing the UK government is currently saying seems to be pointing in that direction. And I think that's going to be an increasing issue as the years go on.
Yeah. I think the UK government has allowed reform policies to influence their policies. I think that's abysmal. I think that's appalling. I think the fact that reform has been given almost any debate, I can't remember this morning what programme it was I listened to or watched, where they had someone from the UK government and Reform. Now, Reform are not a major party in the UK, but they're on every panel, they're on every programme, and they are allowed to say what they think should happen. And their policies are anathema to me personally. And I think they stop the UK government actually moving forward and bringing in more people, because there are huge gaps in the economy. Care sector is a prime example, and now they've raised the earnings for immigrants. It absolutely means that we are absolutely not going to close the gap that is needed for employment, and I'm using the care sector as one of the biggest gaps in the economy. Now, it's really important that we sort this out. But while Reform are standing there giving out their speeches of hate and all of that, I think things are just going to get worse. I think tightening controls. Nobody wants unlimited immigration. Yeah. Nobody wants that. But I think to allow the dial to be twisted in entirely the wrong way. For example, who is taking on the jobs that in the past immigrants did, or that immigrants were allowed visas in to do the jobs, and now because of the restrictions on the limits of how much you can earn, that is changing the whole thing. And we need to sit down calmly and look at this and make sure we're talking about growth. If we cannot have growth if people are having to give up jobs to look after elderly people, and to think that just people in the UK will just pick up on these jobs when they have shown for the last number of years it's not the kind of work they're interested in doing.
And also these right-wing parties, are they giving the misinformation about difference between illegal migrants and the asylum?
Yes.
And also my other question is, should there be buffer zones in the asylum seekers, accommodations?
Oh, I would certainly support that. We've had a load of protests in Perth lately around the places where a comparatively small number of asylum seekers are housed, 192, I believe, and there have been protests and counter-protests. I think it's one thing to be against the asylum system as it's currently being practiced and to think it should be tighter, etc., and to disagree with the way the government's doing it. It's another thing to harass actual asylum seekers who have no say in where they've been put, and to spread nonsense rumours about their presence in the town and all that sort of nonsense. No, buffer zones, absolutely, I would support.
That means, does it restrict the freedom of expression?
The freedom of expression is already curtailed when you're not allowed hate speech and hate actions, perhaps, as well as hate speech. And it's not a curtailment of your protest about asylum seeking and how it's regulated. It's actually a guard against harassment. There is no right to harass people.
And the difference between the illegal migrants and the asylum seekers,
Well, Reform and folk have absolutely got an interest in conflating the various sorts of things so that it all looks bad. And I think that sort of nuance really needs to come back into debate, and we should not accept the way they frame it. I think Marion was quite right when she said that at the start. There's far too much acceptance of that kind of discourse and the way it's framed.
Yes, absolutely. William, my original reaction to Nadia's question was, of course we shouldn't have buffer zones. But you've actually given me a persuasive argument, because you're living somewhere where refugees are being harassed, where asylum seekers are being harassed, and that we should be protecting them. And if that takes buffer zones, then I'm probably slightly more amenable to that way of doing things. But buffer zones to me are always a bit of, I know we had them over abortion, and I know that we had to protect people. We have to protect people's right to protest, and we have to protect the people that they are protesting about. So yes, I think I'm slowly coming to that. I think we need, in many ways, to show much, much more concern for those people who are under our protection. And I can remember going back to the days of the Red Road flats in Glasgow, when asylum seekers first came to Glasgow in bigger numbers, and people were complaining and saying it wasn't right, and there was all the concerns about them getting flats, etc. And within about a year, we had Scottish grannies out in the streets on Christmas morning watching for asylum vans and sounding the alarm so that people didn't get caught up and get caught and sent away again. So we need to stop promoting what Reform are trying to report, which is we have to stop division and hate.
Yeah.
We have to stop this. I mean, my area in Motherwell and Wishaw, we have Syrian refugees, we've got Ukrainians, we had Congolese, we've lots of Congolese. When I first moved to the area, you didn't see any non-white faces. But over the years, it's become much more noticeable, much more normal, and much healthier, I think, in terms of how people react to each other. Because once the Waynes start going to school together, you generally find that people start to get on much better. And that's a long time if it's just a baby that arrives here. But we have to stop, and it's something that, as a country, we have our issues. We have to stop putting labels on people and saying, I hate you because. It's not about that. We need migrants. We need people to come and work here and to help the economy grow. We're all into economic growth, and that's one way of doing it.
Yeah, it's a topic I would like to go on and on, but we have to move on to the next topic. There was one more thing I wanted to ask. Should the UK be creating more opportunities for migrant workers to come to the UK to work in areas? Instead of UK, can Scotland create work visas? Can Scottish government become the sponsor for the workers?
Well, that's already go on, William. That has actually been happening.
You have any knowledge of this?
Yeah, it has happened in some cases. I mean, Scottish government, I believe, backed Ukrainians to come here because it was all far too long. But we need, since Jack McConnell's time as First Minister, we no longer even have the visas for students to stay on and work longer here, which was really beneficial for Scotland and really beneficial for the workers themselves. So I think this is yet another reason why Scotland does need to be able to run its own affairs as an independent country.
I don't have the legal understanding, but NHS Scotland provides visa for the Scottish immigrants, those who are coming as nurses and doctors, and
Scotland can't provide any visas themselves, but again, we just
can they not become the sponsor?
They can sponsor, but then of course you're up against the whole thing of how much these people earn. So if it's lower paid end of the National Health Service, then, and then there are lower paid ends of the National Health Service, then they can't, because it doesn't meet the UK requirements for earnings per year. And also with not letting families in as well, either for students or for migrant workers, that is a huge disincentive as well.
Thank you. Shall I move on, and would you like to add some?
I think Marion's captured it.
Yeah, thank you. On International Women's Day, the Scottish Government has announced funding for women to leave abusive relationships. Marion?
Well, I think that's a really wonderful thing, because women generally cannot leave an abusive relation. One of the main drivers for them staying is economic survival. They can't afford to move out, they can't afford to look after their children, and they really can't afford, to find new accommodation. And if this fund is already working, it's helped over 200 women and about 300 children to get out of an abusive relationship. And because it's being done through Women's Aid principally, that is a really good idea, and it's a really practical step to help these women and children who are living lives of complete misery. And normally, lots of people, even families of the women and children involved, don't know what's going on in these relationships. So if it gives them a way to leave, then I'm all for it. I think it's something that, again, they should look at UK-wide in the UK government. But, Scotland is interested in looking after its citizens in a very practical way, and I think this is absolutely to be commended, this whole idea, this whole fund. This, as we say, is already working, but we need to get the word out there. We really need to get the word out there to women who are in this terrible, terrible position.
William?
I agree with all of that, yes. It's an absolute unequivocal good, and I applaud it. And my best wishes to anybody who's celebrating International Women's Day, because I had forgotten it was that until I saw what was coming up in today's programme. So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent many years celebrating International Women's Day, and I think it's really interesting now that a lot more men are involved in the whole thing, and understand. I mean, I'm an older woman, quite old, very old in fact, and I can see the threads of what's happened over the peace, and the attitude generally, and especially from older men. I once gave a speech on International Women's Day that talked about my late husband, who was brought up by his mother and 4 older sisters, and who was brought up in the belief that he was the man and he didn't have to do anything, and his word was very important. And over the years, how he changed his position, because at that time, when he died, he had 3 granddaughters. And if anyone had said that his granddaughters wouldn't have the same opportunities as young boys, he would have been incandescent with rage. And I think it's really important that we move this forward and we keep this going.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's time for us to round up for today. Yeah, well, that's it for this week's Full Scottish. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. We can only exist with your support. Our programs will always be free to view. However, if you can afford $5 per month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter and please donate whatever you can afford. Thank you, and thank you again to our guests Marion and William. Goodbye and thank you for watching.